Hello everyone, I am Anupama and I welcome you to Nagesh Karasgi Orchid School channel once again. Today I am here to teach you a lesson in English for grade 9 and the lesson number is lesson number 6, Weathering the Storm in Erasama. My dear children, we have already done with session 1, that's one wherein I have introduced with this chapter. Once again, before we continue with the further session, I would like to recapitulate everything in nutshell. Dear children, I told you about this incident when exactly it took place. It was in the year 1999 October where the super cyclone hit or slammed Odisha state. The super cyclone was so devastating wherein it swept away the thousands of houses wherein many people became homeless as well as many children became orphan. My dear children, the super cyclone, the catastrophic disaster was so horrible that even the main character of the story, whom the story revolves around, is Prashant. Even he had noticed or witnessed this disaster first time in his life. So even we could see that Prashant, he is only 19 years old who witnesses this super cyclone wherein he had been to one of his friend where he had to travel 18 kilometers away from his village Kalikuda and he had been to Erasama. And that evening we even could see that the heavy rainfall or the downpour of the rain was so much that it devastated, it destroyed everything that was in the village. As well as we could see that all of a sudden when this flood or when this cyclonic wind attacked, we could see that many of the houses were been blown away. Prashant's friend's house was a pakka house. So the reason his house could tolerate or endure the pressure or the intensity of the storm. How much was the intensity of the storm? It was 350 kilometers per hour. My dear children, you can imagine how devastating it would be. Even then we could see that Prashant as well as his friend's family, all of them together marooned or they stayed on the rooftop of the house for 2 days. The devastating effect of the storm lasted for coming 36 hours. And that time what did happen exactly, we will see everything in detail now. So I want my dear children everybody's attention in your textbook, Movements textbook, page number 38. I want everyone with pen and pencil in the hand so that I am reading the chapter and I am going to explain you the difficult word meaning. The crazed destruction wrought is something which is produced by or brought by the cyclone, and the surge, I told you surge is nothing but the force of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours. Although wind speed had reduced somewhat by the next morning. To escape the water rising in the house, Prashant and his friend's family had taken refuge. I told you refuge is nothing but to take shelter on the roof. Prashant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpse. Glimpse is nothing but the sight of the devastation. Devastation is the destruction wrought, that is brought by the super cyclone in the grey light of the early morning. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. Only fractured cement houses still stood in a few places. So we can see, my dear children, that was the first time that Prashant had ever witnessed such kind of destruction that he says that he will never forget in his life. What had happened that in the light of grey light of early morning, I mean like the evening, when this super cyclone slammed with the speed of 350 kilometers, I must say probably this was the greatest cyclonic disaster ever recorded in this last century. And even the devastation was so horrible that it killed almost 10,000 people, as well as 3.5 lakh of houses were been destroyed, more than 2 lakh of animals who have been died,
as well as several villages were completely destroyed. So this was the devastation that was brought by this catastrophic calamity. And so the reason he says that when it was early morning after that evening, he still could see that the raging is nothing but the intensity, the speed, the worsen effect or the crazed cyclone still continued, and how it was deadly. Why? Because it killed lot many people. Even the brown sheet of water covered everything. Why it was brown sheet? Because the flood, because the water, whatever was there on the ground, it got mixed up with the soil on the ground, and so the reason he could notice that the water was in brownish color, and that water, it covered everything. Almost the whole village was inside the water, and as far as he could see, he could only see the devastation that was being caused by the super cyclone. Only those houses, those were made of cement, those were pakka houses, those were concrete houses, they could endure or they could withstand the intensity of the wind which blew 350 kilometers per hour. And then we could see that all round huge old trees had fallen. As I told you, initially we could see that even the old trees were uprooted. They got uprooted right from the anchoring of the earth. So even those trees were even been got out from the anchoring earth. Those were been uprooted. Everything was destroyed. 2 coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. This was a blessing in disguise. Underline the word blessing in disguise, because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving in the several days that followed. So now I'll tell you what happened. As initially in here only we could see that when the whole family was in cold terror. Why the whole family was in cold terror? Because the trees, the huge coconut trees had already fallen on the rooftop of Prashant's friend's house, and that made the family worry about this disaster. But now if you see that this statement says that the 2 coconut trees had fallen on the rooftop of their house, which was a blessing in disguise. Disguise, write the meaning. And apparent misfortune that eventually has good result. Okay. So what it means that initially when the whole family thought that this is the destruction, now what we are going to do with this huge trees, those are fallen on the rooftop of the house, and it was very difficult for them to come out from that place also. Initially thought that this is the misfortune or unfortunate thing. But later on the same unfortunate thing turned to be very fortunate. Why? Because these 2 coconut trees had coconut fruit, and because of that tender coconut, tender means the soft coconut which it had, because of that the whole family that was trapped means what, they were made to maroon at one place for continuous 2 days. And then what they would eat, how they would survive? Starving is the condition where you don't have food to eat, and wherein these 2 coconut trees helped them to get these coconuts, and they ate, they fed themselves on those coconuts, wherein this family could avoid themselves for starving. So this kept the trapped family from starving in several days that followed. Then for the next 2 days Prashant sat huddled. Huddled is nothing but to sit at one place. Huddled with his friend's family in the open on the rooftop. They froze in the cold and incessant rain. The rainwater washed away Prashant's tears. My dear children, please do underline the complete sentence that they froze. They froze means nothing but they were freezed because it was chilling cold. Since last evening it was raining like anything. There was extreme heavy to heavy downpour, and so the reason the whole atmosphere was in chilling cold. As they had to be on the rooftop for the whole night, And when the next day early morning it was chilling cold, they were completely frozen, they were freeze in the cold and incessant, that is unceasing, unstoppable, continuous rain, the downpour, it was continuous, it was very heavy and it continued for next 36 hours. The rainwater washed away Prashant's tears. Very important statement in this chapter, that while Prashant was observing all this devastation, everything, this destruction, the people, they were all filled with grief, they were filled with sadness. They had no option. All were taken in surprise. The only thing was left to just watch the devastation that was been created by this catastrophic cyclone. And we could see at that time even Prashant was crying. He was full disappointed. He was worried about his family, he was worried about his village, he was worried about the people around, because thousands of people were homeless now. Many children became orphan, and even he could see in the same village wherein he had stayed with his friend in Erasama, the whole village got swept away because of the flood of the water. And then he started to cry, but even the heavy rainfall, the downpour of the rain, even wouldn't allow him to, go with that action, go with that flow, go with that emotion. So at the same time when it was raining, his tears were being flown away by the rainwater. So how disappointing this situation or this statement, it can say the worsened effect, the worsened situation of Prashant as well as the family that was marooned on the rooftop. We'll continue. The only thought that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury. Fury is nothing but the intensity, we can say, fury of the super cyclone. Was he to be bereaved once again? Oh, that's really important, because at the initial starting point of the lesson we could see that this was the time for Prashant. In the year 1999, even the day and date has been mentioned, that is on October 27th, when he had been to his friend's house. And it was a time wherein from that point, before 7 years ago, he had lost his mother. So now when he had been to this place, Erasama, to just visit, to pay visit to his friend as well as his house, and then he was trapped because of this cyclone, he couldn't move from that place. So the only option left in his hand was to wait and watch. While doing so, while crying, while observing, while witnessing all this devastation, the only thing what he was thinking in his mind, what was going on in his mind, was about his family. That was 18 kilometers away from Erasama. And then even it is quite obvious that the super cyclone had slammed complete Odisha state. That means it's obvious that even his village and the people inhabiting in that village must have witnessed the same devastation. So he was so much worried that he just thought about his family for the whole night, for the whole day. He was dwelling in their thoughts, whether they have survived, whether they are alive, how my house is, how the people are in my village. And again one more thought came in on his mind, that was he to be bereaved? Bereaved is nothing, underline the word and write the meaning, to lose, or to lose any of the family member or friend to death. So this statement is why that important for Prashant, because he has already lost his mother 7 years back. And then this was the condition where he was thinking that if my family won't survive, or if they, if the ill effects of this cyclone would swallow everything, what if my family is not there, then again there will be a condition of bereaved. Bereaved is nothing but again he will have to lose any of the family member, and then he would have to go in that emotional situation. So once again means what? Because he had already lost his mother, now he was thinking about the whole entire family members. Then 2 days later, which seemed to Prashant like 2 years, very important. It's quite obvious, my dear children, because it was only 2 days. Those were only 2 days, but the effect, the ill effect of, the devastating effect of this super cyclone had made people go in depression. And for Prashant, who was confined over there, who was trapped in that village, it seemed to him like 2 years, because the rain ceased, and then the rain ceased and the rainwater slowly began to recede. Now underline the word, the rain ceased. Ceased means what? After 2 days we could see that the heavy downpour of the rain stopped. Even the rainwater slowly began to recede. I have told you that the whole village was entirely dipped inside the flood water, which was in brownish color. But after 2 days we could see that slowly the rainwater which has entered these villages, it started to reduce its level. Recede is nothing but to reduce the level. Prashant was determined to seek out his family without further delay. So Prashant was simply waiting when the rainfall will stop, and then he can get out from that rooftop, and then he will start his journey, wherein he will start that journey to search his family members. So the moment when he could see that it was almost done, I mean the heavy rain that began to rain for continued 2 days, it stopped, as well as the level of water that even got reduced. So Prashant thought that it's the time wherein I should leave this place and I should start my journey, because I need to search my family members. So without any delay, without delay of a few fraction of second, he moved from that place. But the situation was still dangerous, and his friends, family pleaded with Prashant to stay back a little while longer. But Prashant knew he had to go. So now, though it had stopped raining, though the level of the water started to reduce, but still the condition was worsened. It was dangerous. So Prashant's friend's family as well as his friend pleaded, that means requested him to stay for little while, because the situation was so dangerous, because we did not know what will happen next. But Prashant did not listen. He did not restrain his emotions. He wanted to see his family, whether they are alive, whether they are surviving, whether they have faced this catastrophe and they are well and fine wherever they are. So he did not listen to any of the family member and he left that place. He equipped himself. Equipped is nothing but he got with something. With a long, sturdy is nothing but very strong stick, and then started on his 18 kilometers expedition. Expedition is nothing but a journey which will be very difficult for Prashant as of now. Back to his village through the swollen flood waters. Why it is swollen? Because we could see that its flood water, the level of the water which had entered inside the village was too high. And when he actually started with his journey, he got with a long sturdy stick. It had got something to do with that, I'll tell you later on. And then he started with his journey for 18 kilometers from his village. I mean, like I told you that his village was away from Erasama, 18 kilometers away. So along with the long sturdy stick, he started this expedition which was going to be very difficult for him. And then it was a journey he would never forget. It's quite obvious, my dear children, even you can imagine that when you are completely filled with flood water and when there is no pathway, you cannot find the roads, you cannot find the way wherein you are supposed to go properly. Everywhere if you see there is devastation, everywhere if you see there are carcasses of the dead bodies as well as dead bodies of the cattle, everything was devastated. You couldn't see a single house or in that village that was survived this catastrophic effect. And so the reason this journey of 18 kilometers for Prashant was something which he will never forget in his life. He constantly means continuously, had to use his stick to locate the road, to determine where the water was most shallow. Most shallow means where it was not that deep. Now, my dear children, you can see this picture. See, there hardly we can see that 2-3 houses are there, and probably these houses are made of cement and concrete. These are the pakka houses. So, the reason they could tolerate the gushing wind, the speed of 350 kilometers per hour, as it has been mentioned in the chapter, and it could survive. Or you can see wherein the whole village is inside the flood water. This is the swollen flood water wherein you can see the complete devastation. And this is the fellow Prashant who leaves his friend's house, and then with this sturdy, strong stick, he starts making his way to his village, which was 18 kilometers away. And now I told you what was the use of the sturdy stick, because he had to make his way out. He wanted to locate, he wanted to find where is the way, where is the exact road. And this stick, this sturdy stick was going to help him to locate where the road is, where the water is deep, where the water is shallow. So, he started the journey with this stick. At places it was waist deep and progress was slow. So, at some places the level of the water was waist deep, whereas at that moment the progress was slow means what? He had to walk very slowly, because it was very difficult for him to locate the exact way, exact road wherein that road is going to help him to reach his village. And at several points means what? At many points, at many places, he lost the road and had to swim. It's quite obvious he lost the road, because the whole village was filled with the flood water, and so he had to swim. After some distance, he was relieved. Relieved is nothing but he was little bit pleased. Why he was pleased? To find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. So, after a couple of minutes, he came across two of the friends of his uncle, where these two people, they were even going to the same village. When he found them, he found little pleased, he was little happy, because those people were known to him. And then all three of them, they together decided that they'll leave this place and they'll move ahead and go back to their village. As they waded means nothing but as they swam through the waters, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. Underline the word macabre is nothing but horrible. So, my dear children, slowly, when these three of them, they were moving further and further, and whatever they were witnessing, the scene, the entire catastrophic devastation what they could see, that was growing severe, that was so horrible to their sight. What it was, why it was? Because they had to push away many human bodies. So, while they were swimming, while they were wading, while they were walking, they were making their way towards their village, the scene became so horrible, because at every point, at every situation, they could see that the human bodies, those were swollen, the carcasses of the dead bodies, those were floating on the flood water. How horrible it is to just simply imagine. But this is not the imagination of Prashant. He himself had experienced. You can even feel that pain, how he would have tolerated, how he had to endure that and face this challenge. The bodies were of men, women and children. The bodies, the human bodies, those were floating, those were dead, those were of men, women and several children. And the carcasses of dogs, goats and cattle, that the current is nothing but the cyclone, swept means to wash away against them, and they moved ahead. So, why the scene is called so horrible, my dear children? Because while they were swimming, going through the village, they were trying to find out their way. On the way, the scene was so horrible, it was so macabre, because all the dead bodies were floating on the flood water. The dead bodies were of human, men, women and children. At the same time, they could see the carcasses of animals, cattle, goats, dogs. So while they were swimming, they had to make the way out, and at the same moment they had to take away those dead bodies away from the way. So you can imagine how painful it could be for Prashant as well as those two people. And so the reason this scenario was the deadliest scenario wherein he had ever witnessed. Then in every village that they passed, they could barely means hardly see a house standing. So as in the picture also we could see that hardly a house withstood this catastrophic effect. And because the village was of there were not many pakka houses. The village probably had huts, and they did not have any idea that this super cyclone would affect the village in that extent. So the reason from that way, from Erasama to Kalikuda, whatever the villagers came on their way, they could see that in every village they passed, they crossed that village, they could hardly see that, they barely could see, hardly could see that the houses were still standing tall. That means only the pakka houses, the house that was made of cement and concrete, could withstand this effect. Or else there were many villages that they got destroyed. The flood water swept away everything. And Prashant now wept out loud and long. So now, while he was passing, while he was making his way out from those dead bodies, from those carcasses, from those corpses, he could only see the devastation that was caused by the super cyclone. And every village, not a single village was left out of this ill effect of this super cyclone. And then now further need to say that Prashant had already started to imagine that his village has equally got devastated because of this natural calamity. And slowly, when he was approaching, when he was nearing his village, he started to weep, he started to cry loudly, because he could not restrain his emotions now. He thought that the next scenario what he is going to face, it would be something which he would not tolerate, which he would not digest probably. And he was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. Catastrophe is nothing but the deadliest disaster. So he had already imagined, he already started to imagine that probably this catastrophe, this deadliest disaster has swept away everything, all the villages. Still now whatever he crossed, he could see that hardly the houses were still standing, human beings were there, or otherwise the devastation was with full ill effect. And so the reason he started to imagine that his family would have not survived. And so the reason he started to weep, he started to cry loudly. Eventually means finally, Prashant reached his village, that is Kalikuda. I told you, my dear children, the village which was 18 kilometers away from Erasama, where Prashant lived, that village name is Kalikuda. And finally he reached at his village. His heart went cold. His heart went cold means what? He was so much terrified. He was deeply sank in his thoughts, in his pain, in his sadness, in his grief, we can say. Where their home once stood, there were only remnants. Remnants means nothing but the small remaining quantity of its roof. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled is nothing but get entangled, and twisted is nothing but curved or to form U shape, in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. So the moment finally when he reached his village Kalikuda, From the distance place, he could see that once upon a time, wherein at that place, particular place where his house used to be there, he only could see that the remnants of his house, the rooftop was left, or else everything, means everything, the possession, every belonging of Prashant's family was swept away, washed away. And he could see that few of the remnants, those were entangled in the branches of the trees, and he could see only that. So from this, he had guessing that probably he has lost his entire family. None of the family members would survive with this catastrophic effect. And so, young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. So now, my dear children, what is Red Cross shelter? This is nothing but a charitable organization, and this organization is something like whenever there is epidemic, there is any catastrophic effect, there is disaster, this institute or this organization helps people to get food, shelter, clothing. So my dear children, now we have seen in this chapter that Prashant reaches his village Kalikuda, and then even we could see that he only could see his remnants of houses. In the next chapter, we will see that whether his family was very much alive, and then what he does next. I hope you have understood till here and written all the difficult word meaning. Till the time, thank you everyone, take care.